Welcome to Modding Zomboid. Today we'll be using 3ds Max to transfer weights from the character rig to your custom clothing model. First thing you're going to want to do is make sure that your model is zeroed out. So you come over here to the hierarchy tab, select your pivot only, and make sure you're on move, and make sure you're zeroed out here in the X, Y, and Z space. Okay, my model's already zeroed out, so we're going to move on. Once that's done, I like to transform and scale my model here. Reset, transform, and scale. I also go over here to the utilities tab, and I will reset my X form. Now these are just common practices that I use every time I go through a model before I go through this process. Another thing I like to do is I like to pop a quick little render on here, make sure that everything is displaying correctly and there's no flip normals. Everything looks good, so we're moving on. Okay, so you're going to come over here to your Modified tab and make sure that your clothing model is selected. You're going to click the modifier list, hit S, and select Skin Wrap. Once Skin Wrap is here in your modifier list, you're going to go through the settings like so. Select the deformation engine and put it on face deformation. Make sure blend to base mesh is selected. Drop this down to 0.01. Come down here and click weight all points. This all looks good. Now this is where the magic happens. You click the add button here and click the body of whatever you're transferring to. It doesn't necessarily have to be this model. This works with many other different models, but in this case it will be body. So click that. We'll see body listed here. Double check your settings. Everything looks good. Now you're going to see this convert to skin button down here on the bottom. Click that. You'll notice now you have a skin modifier above your skin wrap modifier. Now generally you can click a bone, like say the clavicle here, and you'll be able to see if your weights are moving. So we're golden. Reselect your clothing model. Left click skin wrap because we don't need this anymore. Once skin wrap is selected, right click it. Select collapse to. Not collapse all, collapse to. When you click collapse to, you'll get this warning. Select yes. Now you'll notice that the skin wrap modifier is gone and you are left with only a skin modifier. That is what you want. The skin weights have been transferred. Now for the next step. Now depending on what you're making, there's going to be some of these bones in this list here that you don't need. For instance, we don't have anything on the feet or the hands, and there's no backpack here. So we're going to ditch those bones. Another thing to note is you don't need any nubs in your bone list here. So remove all nubs and whatever bones you don't need. We're going to be removing backpack, all the dress bones, the head nub, anything that ends with nub we don't need. We also don't need any fingers, so we'll get rid of those. We don't need toes. And that should be it. This looks pretty clean. These are all the bones we need for this model. Now, once you have all this stuff removed, all the bones you don't need removed out of this list, we're pretty much ready for export. There's only one last thing to do. We're not going to need this body anymore, because if we export the scene with this body is just going to be clipping over the body that exists within the game. So go ahead and hit delete on that and get rid of that. You'll see that the bones are still working as intended. The body was not doing much other than we were stealing the weights from it. Okay, now that you have only your clothing model here, make sure that you have the correct material applied to that. Make sure nothing is selected in the scene. Come up here to your max file export. Make sure you're exporting in FBX. Name your clothing item. And save. Now here's the settings. These are the settings that I use. Smoothing groups, not necessarily needed as the game doesn't really use smoothing groups. I leave it on. Tangents and binormals. Preserve edge orientation. You'll notice what is selected and what is not here. Animation is on. Ignore bake animation. Make sure your deformations are checked. Units are set to centimeters. Let's just go over that one more time. Smoothing groups, tangents and binormals, preserve edge orientation. Deformations, centimeters as your units. Click OK, and your model is exported. Now the real trouble starts when you have to import it into the game. Good luck.